Very good evening, everyone. It's so great to see such a full lecture hall tonight, especially in this ghastly weather. But you're here, we're all here to hear Penny Yiou Peng speak as part of our lecture series, Psychedelic Reason, co-organized with Wenyi Teo, Senior Lecturer in Modern and Contemporary Asian Art here at the Courtauld, and Dr. Yiou Peng, Asymmetry's Postdoctoral Fellow. The series forms part of our multi-year research partnership between Asymmetry and the Courtauld, and tonight marks the final lecture in this chapter of our collaboration, though not quite the end. We will have, so each year, each series culminates in an international symposium, and this year's takes place on the 22nd of May with an exciting lineup of artists and scholars, so we warmly invite you to join us once again. Across the three series we've developed together over the years, we've moved through a set of urgent questions. Energies of attachment reconsidered intimacy, affect, and affiliation in contemporary art, especially coming out of the pandemic. Critical habitats examined ecology, infrastructure, and the material, as well as ethical conditions that shape our lived spaces. And psychedelic reason turns to perception itself, exploring altered states, sensorial knowledge, and speculative thinking as ways of recalibrating how we experience the world around us. For those who don't know us, I'm Michelle Landau, Director of Asymmetry, an independent non-profit organization based in East London. We support curators and researchers with Chinese and Sinophone backgrounds through curatorial and scholarly placements, funded and supported at public institutions and universities alongside a very active public programming and a specialist library. So do come and pay us a visit. Over the course of this partnership, we welcome an extraordinary community of artists, scholars, and curators to the stage. From Xinyi Cheng, Lotus Kang, and Zheng Guo to Enzo Camacho and Amy Lian, Shen Xin and Li Kaichong, researchers such as Gary Zhexi Zhang and Nina Yu, and curators including Alvin Li, Joni Zhu, and Mal Khalaf, among many others. My sincere thanks to Wenyi for such a generative collaboration. We are already thinking about what's coming next. Thank you to Yiou for her rigor and commitment, and to our previous postdoctoral fellow, Dr. Fei Xuanxu as well. Thank you to the Research Forum and the Courtauld for their partnership and support. And finally, thank you to our loyal audience. You've helped make this program one of Asymmetry's hallmark programs. And now please join me in welcoming Wenyi, who will introduce our wonderful speaker, Penny. Thank you.
Hi everyone, as Michelle says, it's lovely to see so many of you here in the audience tonight, and to welcome so many of you back as well. So as many of you will know, our first two lectures approached this topic of psychedelic reason from distinct vantage points. And if you've missed them, they are available online for you to watch, of course. Just to recap a little bit of what was discussed, our first speaker, Gary Zhexi Zhang, examined the technopolitics of parasocial media, tracing how network systems shape psychic collectivity. Our second speaker, Ricardo Yui, reflected on modernity's fractures through filmic journeys across sites marked by rupture and historical sediment. So in different ways, both speakers unsettle what passes for common sense, exploring how our sense of reality is structured, mediated, and felt. This evening, our speaker, Penny Yiou Peng, turns more directly to the phenomenological dimensions of the psychedelic. She examines how artistic and linguistic practices might reach the edges of perception and translate the ineffable into shared sensory experience. So in a sense, we might think of this lecture's exploration of psychedelia as a kind of methodological provocation as well. And Penny's very interdisciplinary academic background really already signals this sort of boundary-crossing radical practice. She first studied economics economics and film studies at Smith College and completed an MA in film studies at UCL, after which she pursued a PhD in philosophy at the Institute of Theatre Studies at Freie Universität Berlin, under the supervision of Michael Marder and Matthias Barstadt. now based between Berlin and Beijing, Penny moves fluidly across philosophy, dramaturgy, and performance in her practice, in what she calls an ecological sensing practice. So this is what Penny will be sharing with us this evening, and I think it's important to add that I think that this is a very bold and in fact courageous approach to thinking through some of these issues. Far from taking a kind of detached observational stance, you instead move towards understanding aesthetic experience as a collaborative and embodied and indeed sensorial process. So please join me in welcoming Penny.
Hello, can you hear me well? I have a soft voice, so I'm trying to speak louder. Thank you so much, Winnie, for such a beautiful introduction. And I feel so happy to be here also because I studied in London, I think almost 10 years ago. So if I speak like this, can you hear me well? Okay, great. So I studied in London almost 10 years ago, and so being here just tonight feels incredibly nostalgic and also deeply meaningful. And this leads to my sincere gratitude towards Dr. Winnie Taylor, and also Asymmetry Foundation, to Michelle, Jessica, Yiou, and other lovely colleagues from Courtauld to make this evening possible. And I also want to send my gratitude toward all of you for your curiosity and for your trust, and also for your precious presence tonight with us. I don't necessarily think that this is going to be a lecture, since I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't know. I believe that in the next 45 minutes, what I'm going to speak about is somehow already in your body, if it's not consciously, but intuitively. So if you have any immediate thoughts or questions you would like to raise, then please feel free to interrupt me. Also, final kind reminder is that in case if you are falling to sleep, great. Since sleeping and dreaming is probably one of the most common psychedelic states that we experience on a daily basis. So I will be really honored to cradle you into that state and enjoy that. So first, I would like to briefly talk about why do I choose sensing as the entry point to the psychedelic reason, which is the main topic of the lecture series. I began with questioning, what if sensing is a verb? What actually happens? What actually takes place? How do we do in the process of sensing? It's an open question, so is there anyone who wants to share something? Maybe when we reason, what actually we do when we reason. Great. I kind of telepathically connect all your thoughts. So as a summary, I will share, say, okay, we encounter a phenomenon and we observe this phenomenon and we internalize the kind of observation or the information from the observation of that phenomenon, and perhaps we analyze it or transform into an argument and based on logic or rationality. Here, if you are with me, that perhaps you can already see how sensing is so naturally, organically involved in the process, as we're dependent on seeing, hearing, tasting, and touching to perceive the phenomenon at the first place. So I would argue that reasoning cannot be separated from sensing. And sensing is a fundamental way to perceive reality, to build relationship, and to build worlds. And it contributes to the formation of our emotions, of our desires, and eventually influences our thoughts, habits, and thinking patterns. And here I would like to share something I just learned recently. So basically in Sanskrit, there's a particular term to describe the kind of information that we perceive from our eyes and nose, basically all the holes on our body, which is called jnana indriya. It could be translated as the wisdom information. So it's not just information, it's a form of wisdom. And we internalize this kind of wisdom information and then transform it into sensual experience. And I found it really interesting, how our body is already kind of enacted with this kind of profound wisdom, perhaps a way to be recognized, as we might take it for granted. And another interesting observation is that this is going to get a bit personal. As I grew up in Beijing and then Boston and then living in Europe, I also observed that cultures are shaped either to have an emphasis on sensing or reasoning. And this difference could be reflected in language, especially in this kind of colloquial rhetoric. So the first example I wanted to show is that, let's say, when we express our opinion in English, what would we say?
I think.
Exactly. We say, I think, and think implies to think perhaps reasonably or critically, especially in the academic context, which is like very much focusing on this kind of cerebral-based analytical skills. And in Mandarin, we also have a term that expresses something similar. We say 我觉得. So 我 means I, and 觉 could refers to 觉知, awareness, or 觉察, becoming aware through a certain observation process, and so on and so forth. So, and then 我觉得 could literally be translated as I feel, or I have the feeling that. So here it clearly shows that how sensing comes into play in forming an opinion almost in an intuitive way. And another example I wanted to talk about is that, when I first learned English in kindergarten, and the very first sentences I learned was, hello, my name's Penny, how are you? I'm fine, thank you, and you? And it's very useful as perhaps how are you could be one of the most common greetings in the English-speaking world. And it also took me some time, when after I moved to the States, it took me some time to figure out when people ask me, how are you? They're actually not asking you, how are you feeling? It kind of forms as a sort of polite abstraction. It is a manner of speech. And in contrast, here I'm going to be very specific, that I grew up in the hutongs in Beijing. So when people meet each other and then they ask, they greet each other, they would normally ask, have you eaten? They would say, like, 你吃了吗? And then if I answer that, yes, I have eaten, and then the question would be, what have you eaten? And how does it taste like? So in a sense that you are asked to be aware of what kind of stuff that you put into your body in a very physical and material way. And the questions are actually the invitations to recall tastes, smells, color, shapes, which is very much connected to our senses. And now looking back, I realized, there was already a kind of sensational training going on that is deeply embedded in the seemingly trivial exchange of everyday life. So comparing to this, if I would have answered, how are you? I would say, I'm good, I'm rarely bad, or well. So all these adjectives almost feels like metaphysical. So in this way, it seems to me that in Chinese culture, there is, or at least there was, some sort of weight putting on sensing, while in the West, there is perhaps more focus on reasoning. and not to mention, in continental philosophy, is deeply engaged with the historical fact that the Western tradition has acclaimed reason and rationality as the defined qualities of humanity. And here I wanted to make it clear that I'm only referring to the early Enlightenment thinkers, which then nowadays perhaps greatly criticized by the anthropocentrism. But what I'm trying to show here is that there is a strong emphasis on reasoning in the Western thinking tradition. Now, new generations of philosophers have taken very different paths. For example, Federico Companion, I found that it's helpful perhaps to look at his notion of techniques and magic in relation to reasoning and sensing. So in this book, Techniques and Magic, Companion argues that I'm just going to really try to simplify all the complex ideas in this book. But I really strongly recommend if you are interested to go to read this book. So what is technique? Technique is basically the way that we wake up in the morning and we look around ourselves and we're firmly convinced that the system of language that we use to catalog and to organize and to understand and to manage the world perfectly capture the reality. In other sense, that we have already grasped reality as what it is, and we have dominated within our language, a kind of symbolic order that represents, describes, and executes our reality. And this is very much that we believe at the moment. So here we refers to the modern humans who participate in the production consumption mode of social relations. And magic works in a very different system. Is that we wake up in the morning and then we open our eyes and we remain aware that yes, we can tell the time, we can measure the distance in the space, and we can name things, but these are fictions. And because in fact, there is a kernel with everything that is beyond language and beyond understanding. So magic precisely advises us to keep in mind that there is an access to every single thing in the world that we encounter, like a pen, this computer, penny, or moment of the day, that there's an access that is remaining ineffable. And that access is the greatest part of that thing. So the rest which you can say, which you can understand, is fleeting and is linguistic, is fictional, and it can be modified and twisted. For example, let's say nation, state, or currency. These are all linguistic entities. And the problem is that very often we sacrifice magic for the sake of technique. And magic invites us to keep in mind that it might be dangerous to try to destroy something that is real and ineffable in the name of something that is fictional and linguistic. So my personal take from this is that, we're able to enter the realm of technique perhaps through reasoning, as we are equipped with linguistic and analytical skills, while the ineffable and the unfathomable can only be experienced through sensing. And I argue that we need both reasoning and sensing to enter the realm of magic, in our context, the realm of psychedelia. In other words, to practice psychedelic reason is to engage in reasoning through sensing. And reasoning and sensing must go hand in hand in order to comprehend the complexity of the real, which is more psychedelic than one can ever imagine. And here I use the Tai Chi symbol because I think it perfectly illustrates the relationship between sensing and reasoning. I think they are intra-connected. And then because we cannot reason without sensing, and we also need reason to be able to train our mind to be able to distinguish what are the senses are our projections and what are the senses that comes from the direct experience. And now we're facing another problem, is that we're losing our capacity to sense. And our senses are constantly shaped by media, by data and the screen, and outsourcing to algorithms. And there's a tendency that we, the modern human, requires louder music and more spectacular visuals and stronger stimulants just to feel that we exist. And I propose that this sensory numbness is not just a side effect, but a driving force behind our polycrisis, be it financial, be it ecological or social. Because when we cannot feel the world, we cannot relate to it. French philosopher and also wolf tracker Baptiste Morizot referred such condition as the impoverishment of the sensibility. In Ways of Being Alive, published in 2020, he writes, "The current ecological crisis is a crisis in our relations with living beings, a crisis of sensibility. That is, an impoverishment of what we can feel, perceive, and understand of living beings, and the relations we can weave with them, a reduction in the range of affects, percepts, concepts, and practices connecting us to them." And artist Zheng Bo also gave a very specific example where they describe a situation about how we enjoy the globalized modes of living, yet our compassion towards another and toward other living beings fail to travel globally. And they wrote, "Seeing a pig slaughtered before my eyes, or watching the forest near my home being cut down, that fills me with terror and makes me want to act. But if I see a video of pigs killed on a farm, or read a report about rainforests in South America being cleared for soybeans, I might feel sad, but it's a shallow, fleeting kind of pain. It doesn't move me to do anything. It's as if my emotions and the very physiology that creates them haven't caught up with my modern globalized life. I still only grieve for death that happened close by. I only feel real anger at violence I can see. I only fear the ecological disaster on my own doorstep. Yet here I am, living a global lifestyle, depending on resources from every corner of the world, while lacking the basic capacity to feel the planet's systems. I've hardly even considered my responsibility to it. We've perfected the technology to ship soybeans across the world cheaply, but we haven't figured out how to make my heart feel the right kind of fear when a rainforest on the other side of the globe is found." And then I also want to share a personal experience. I don't know if you've encountered this in London, but after I came back to Berlin, New Year's and Christmas, so every street corner that I pass by, there is abandoned Christmas tree. It's just shocking to see how people can just reduce a living being into mere decorations, and after a few days, it's been discarded. I feel like maybe I'm seeing this every day in our world, a living being reduced into decorations and its death normalized. But this situation is not normal, isn't it? Therefore, I propose that we need not only critical thinking, but critical sensing. We need to urgently return to our senses to remember and cultivate that wisdom in our body, the form of primordial way of being, which we shared with other living beings. And the primordial, I refer to what Merleau-Ponty suggested, our primordial pre-conceptual experience is inherently synesthetic, which means this kind of blending of senses. Let's say one can see words, or hear colors, so on and so forth. Where he wrote in Phenomenology of Perception already in 1945 that synesthetic perception is the rule, And we are unaware of it only because scientific knowledge shifts the center of gravity of experience, so that we have unlearned how to see and hear. So this is the term from technique towards magic, the ineffable, the very psychedelic state of the real, so that we can truly see and hear and smell and taste again, not artificially, but critically, intuitively, and collectively. To be able to feel the pains of others and also the joy of being itself. So this brings me then to the heart of the central challenge. As a writer and a scholar whose primary practice is actually to dance with words, how can I transform the technique, the symbolic order, into embodiment and into feelings? And is that even possible? Can language transform psychedelic states in a form of collective shared experience, namely how to make sense of this world? So then all these questions lead me into my interdisciplinary practice in performance and sound research and somatic practice such as Tai Chi and Hatha Yoga. The purpose or as an attempt to relearn how to sense and to experience the world before language arrives. So now I would like to share maybe some of my practices and just today I would mainly focus on 2 or 3 threads to give you some ideas of the things that I've learned in searching for the answers. The first thread is shimmer. Deborah Bird-Rose introduced how shimmering in Longo language is called beering, is perceived within the indigenous Longo community as a form of aesthetics and sensibility to invite us into a world teeming with diverse species through recognizing the ancestral calling of the everyday life. So, for example, when you look at the sky, the nightly sky, and you see this kind of star blinking, the star shimmering, or you are by the lake and you see this tiny kind of light reflected on the surface of the lake, it's the ancestors trying to communicate with us. So to capture or being captured by shimmer then requires ability to perceive them, the ability to tune into the subtleties, tune into the murmurs of the world. And this links to the project here, Not Fast Twice, which I closely collaborated with the Taiwanese artist Yan-Chun Lin, whom shared a similar interest in the seemingly invisible and inaudible and untouchable space. So here is a body of works exploring different forms of knowledge from the metabolic process of listening as an embodied collective practice. So it's composed of an installation, publication, and performance. And I would like to introduce actually a little bit the seed of this project, which is a story told by Sija Viton, who is part of the indigenous Tao people lived on Orchid Island in Taiwan, where he said that we are composed of ling of all kinds, ling of sky, ocean, land, forest, and the ling of memory. Once we die, all different ling returns to their origin, sky, ocean, land, forest, except the ling of memory. They travel to the white island, which we're asked not to disturb. It's a bit difficult to translate ling. I think maybe the closest understanding could be spirit, or spirit of spirits, or shimmer itself. But it's really one of my favorite Chinese character because it's kind of like a spell. So it consists of 3 different parts. From the top part, it means rain. We have yu, and then in between we have 3 mouths, means cold, and then underneath we have wu, which is a very important profession, I would say, Wuism, if you're interested, all the way traced back to the Shang dynasty, which is kind of like a guru or a medium who's able to communicate the heaven, the earth, and the dead and the living, and to be able to communicate with the ancestors. So how to sense this link? Through Yan's continuous experiment with sleep, sound, and sculpture, she realized that during sleep and dreams, especially this kind of hypnagogic states of falling asleep, our bodies naturally transient into a form of outer state of consciousness, which allows a particular sensibility and vulnerability to emerge. And through sound and vibration, we're able to tune into the seemingly invisible and the seemingly inaudible space. So as part of here, together with another 10 different artists, we created an 8 hours overnight performance that invites the audience to sleep and dream together. And it took place in ICA 2022. And our lovely curators and producer here, Sarah and Jared, and also fellow artist, Marine. So the purpose of this event is not necessarily to create spectacles for the waking eyes, but to focus on everything that surrounds it, the space, and then the air that travels in between the space, and the light, and the sculpture, and the sound. To experiment that if we're able to arrive at the edge of the perception, as half of the performance take place when people are sleeping and dreaming. And I want to maybe introduce a little bit of this sculpture that you see here. It's so Yan had this idea because she dreamt of it. So she really allows herself to be guided by these intuitions and calling from this like hypnagogic states or dream states. And then it's sonic sculpture. So there would be this kind of very delicate frequency that playing, speaking through this kind of sculpture, creature. Perhaps I think maybe I can also share a little bit of the process of this piece, as I also worked at the dramaturg and writer. So I also try to ask myself not to be led by language, not to be led by even like consciousness. But it's really hard as someone who's trained in critical thinking for ages. So what I did is that I implemented this kind of oracle cards and tarot cards. And then so before I started to create the characters, I would allow myself to kind of really be relaxed and feel the emptiness, and then I would actively imagine the performative space, and then the person or the creature whom I would create characters for, but not necessarily from like a human way, but kind of to recall their voices and their sense, or this kind of sensational memory that attached to this creature. And then I just write down whatever comes into my body, and then I also put out a card, and I do a reading of the card, and then I collect all the information, and that becomes the foundation of the characters. And it works really effectively, and I also learned a lot from this experience, how to create logic and consistencies based on senses and intuition. And the second thread is bleach. And which then leads to my collaboration with Cross Lucid. They're an interdisciplinary artist collective co-evolved with technology. So they mostly work with artificial intelligence, film, design, collage, to reimagine our relationship with digital technology as a part of symbiotic biosphere. So together with sound artist Sayaka Botanic, we created the project Dwellers Between Waters. It's an AI-driven film and multi-channel installation. And this project is very much resting on the element of water, and to experience, the qualities of it, how it flows and how it shapeshifts, as well as its capacity of healing. Combining the practice of magic and alchemy, this work specifically seeks the possible solutions in responsible to the traumas of the contemporary anthropos. I can maybe show you a bit of the exhibition view. It goes something like this. And the reason why I link this project with Glitch is that all of us, the creators of this project, believe that glitches are actually the very materiality of the algorithm and the machines. It is a moment when this kind of digital creature wants to breathe and wants to make a stop, to rest, and perhaps to negotiate. So instead of treating them as system errors, we tried our best to cherish these glitches and then kind of incorporate them into part of the creation. So maybe I can show you some of the videos that we made where I was responsible to create the stories of it.
Seeking refuge, we come to you. You don't actually want us. Not a single one. Unless we become you, can we ever become you? We die for the sake of becoming you. We die many times before becoming you. Is there really a refuge? Can we ever live in a place where numbers are squares and colors are ideologies? No, we don't die. Instead of becoming you, we become elements. That the worlds are made of.
Do you want to see another one? Do we have time? Yeah, okay. And I will show another one.
Walking tales, walking tales, walking paths, walking past.
You want to take a rest, so let them rest. If you are interested, I can share you later. So the creative process of all these stories are kind of similar to the previous one. So instead of have a storyboard in the beginning and have like a concrete narrative, we kind of did the opposite, which is Cross-Lucid would made this video first, and then they send it to me, and without telling me what their intentions, and I would watch them as if watching a reading an oracle card or something, and then I just write down whatever comes into my body, and then later I craft it into a story. The third thread is tentacular. I have also developed a great interest in learning about how non-human species perceive and relate to the world. For example, how does reality unfold in the perception of a cat or an octopus? Is it similar to that of Homo sapiens, or is it completely different? If it's different, how different could it be? So together with my scientist friend Jakub Piwowarski, we contributed a piece on the subject of octopus on ecstasy to Spike Art magazine in 2020. And it started with, I discovered that there was an experiment conducted by a scientist in 2018 where they induced MDMA into octopus and then to observe how they would behave. And MDMA is commonly known as this eros drug where, because it amplifies and heightens human senses, perceptions, and emotions, and often perhaps making individuals feel more loving or affectionate. And so the researchers wanted to figure out, how this drug might affect octopus. Given that octopus are generally considered as solitary animals, but actually it's not true. It is not all of them are solitary. It is really depending on the environment and different species. But anyways, the results of the experiment really shocked the scientists, where they observed that the octopus that are high on MD start to perform water aerobatics, and they start to blow bubbles. And then they also kind of extend their tentacles to the one that is not high yet, and then to try to touch it and eventually hack it. So then in this article, I kind of argues that, there is, this experiment suggests a form of prehistorical kinship between octopus and humans. And by tracing back to this demonic representation of octopus in art and popular culture, for example, in The Fisherman's Dream, and you can see how the octopus is fantasized as some kind of monstrous and erotic creature. And the article also questions the legitimacy of such experiments at the first place. There remains a great deal of unlearning to be done in deconstructing human supremacy, because I personally believe that scientists do not have the right to remove octopus from their natural habitat into a laboratory and subject them to experiments like this, even in the name of science. And I think it's interesting because then it brings us back to the discussion of magic and technique. Is there worth to actually sacrifice the magic in the name of technique? So these are some sort of the practices that I did with hoping to figure out how to, answering the previous question, how to make sense of the world. And now I think it's a good kind of moment to coming back to critical sensing. So what is critical sensing? Here I don't want to give a rigid definition, as I believe everybody has their way to sense, and we all sense differently. So perhaps anthropologist Anna Tsing would call it the art of noticing. For me, one possible explanation could be a conscious, enacted movement of attuning to the natural state of being. And being, what is this natural state of being? Is a state of opening and emptiness. So being open to really perceive the wisdom information and being empty to create the space for this information to grow and transform. So this is for me very much a psychedelic state that manifests the mind. Specifically, the key here is awareness. And what is awareness? The clarity of the mind. which could be manifested in the following 3 ways. So the first is that you are aware of what happens in your physical body. Let's say when you feel that I'm good, you may ask yourself, what does it mean that I feel good? Do I sense in a particular way? Does my heart beats in a particular rhythm? So kind of being really aware of this kind of physical and material kind of things that happen in your physical body. And then the second step is that you are aware of the space around you. And this would help you to navigate your environment and to help you to be really present in that space. You may ask yourself, okay, so how does the air taste like now? Is there a micro sound that is playing in the background? Things like this. And then finally, the third step is to be aware of other bodies and shapes that share the space with you. And this might help you to be more perceptive towards other sentient beings and to be more compassionate and understanding. But achieve these 3 steps might sound easy, but it's really difficult to enact, actually. So I think from my own experience, I would argue that mindful practice is really, really important in this regard. For example, for meditation, yoga, and qigong, I think there's really this ancient wisdom and with ancient technology that our ancestors figured out 2,500 years ago how to be able to sustain our relationship with the world and with each other. Some little exercise maybe I could think about where everybody could practice on a daily basis is perhaps actively limit your usage of social media and actively reduce screen time. When you can move, practice active listening and making space for relaxation and making space for not doing anything and not feel guilty about it. And then also one of the most important things through my own practice is that I think to breathe properly is very important because I realize a lot of modern people is like we're breathing through here and so we send a lot of oxygen in our brain, but actually our brain I think only needs approximately 20% of the whole circulation of our oxygen. And we have 18 different sections of our lungs like mapped in our body. So be able to be conscious about the kind of abdominal breathing is very important to be able to send the power into our body and to be more conscious and aware. And last but not the least, perhaps it is a little bit irrelevant, but I would really like to share you this really beautiful videos of Leonora Carrington, who's my most adored painters and writers. Where encountering this video is really life-changing for me. I was play it, and you know why.
You're trying to intellectualize something desperately, and you're wasting your time.
Yeah, what you say? It's like you're trying to intellectualize everything desperately, and you're wasting your time. It was a paradigm shift for me. And in the very end, I would like to really share this little beautiful excerpt from her to end my sharing today. So in the end of the hearing trumpet, she wrote, "Ice ages pass, and although the world is frozen over, we suppose someday grass and flowers will grow again, till the planet is peopled with cats, werewolves, bees, and goats. We all fervently hope that this will be an improvement on humanity, which deliberately renounced the pneuma of the goddess." Thank you.